We're live. Look at that. Awesome. All right. All righty. Well, we got the attendees, future people sitting at the C-suite are joining right now. How do you like that? Okay. It's arguably the most important job in the entire company of the future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, otherwise, what Zoom really needs to put in place, I think, Peter, is like a little bit of background music or something for those awkward, first couple minutes as people are joining. So that, I know, otherwise it's just we're sitting here and, everyone's joining and they're wondering what's going on and they're just listening to us banter. Feel free to throw questions in the chat or the Q&A right now if you want while we're getting started. We're going to give it one more minute as people are getting admitted into the room. Sorry, Peter, go ahead, man. Let's drink my coffee.
When I was first starting this, when we transitioned to doing everything remotely, I've done quite a lot of presenting and do a bit of lecturing at universities. I couldn't believe how scared I was of actually clicking the button to join Zoom calls. Suddenly I had this little moment of panic. And
I know.
I think it's what you said. You don't get the precursor. So normally when you go and do these things, you get up in the morning, you have breakfast, you travel to the venue, you have chat with the receptionist, person takes you up in the lift, you have a chat with them, people drift in the room, you break the ice. Here it's like very binary. It's a technique to get used to.
Well, Richard wants to know what our walk-on music would be. We'd have to come up with like, what would it be? Like, I don't know. I mean, here's something to think about, Peter. Like, what would be the official theme song of the OKR champion? Like, the OKR champions need a theme song, like Rocky had Eye of the Tiger.
Yeah.
I don't see that as
Queen. You got to go Queen. We are the champions.
Nice. I was just watching the Netflix series We Are the Champions last night about the cheese rolling in England and chili eating because I'm a big Carolina Reaper. Oh, Robin suggests I get knocked down, but I get up again.
Oh, actually, I like Chumbawamba. Like it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one, Chumbawamba. And Bunmi says that just loving the banter, no music needed. So I guess we're doing okay. So far, so good. We don't need any more the Mission Impossible theme. That's a good one too. Because being an OKR champion, it's like your mission, should you choose to accept it, is be the OKR champion and get the C-suite to buy into this entirely new mindset. So I like that one. That's a good suggestion. All right, we got a lot going on here. We should probably get started. As much as we love, Chumbawamba, and maybe we can queue up some of these songs and play it on our outtake. I'll work on that while you're doing your presentation. All right. This coffee was really strong this morning. I'm sorry, folks. It's 8 o'clock here on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., where I live. And Peter's up in the north of England, not Scotland. I'd like to highlight that. Anyway, welcome, everybody, to our webinar for this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, the role of OKR champions in successful OKR deployment, which I think we've already covered by identifying the Mission Impossible theme song and the I get knocked down, but I get up again. Our speaker today is Peter Kerr, who is the managing director at Oxine OKR. And I learned a very important data point about the word Oxine because it's not very common. Originally, I thought it was like auxiliary or something like that. But in fact, I'm told that it has a Latin origin, and it is the chemical responsible for two things. One, making plants green and making sure that they grow in a vertical manner. So they are a critical catalyst for growth. So it actually makes a lot of sense that a company which has such a strong foundation in the idea of organic, natural growth would be called Oxine, and then of course would be an OKR. So Peter's our managing director at Oxine OKR. He's responsible for leading the engagement and coaching services there, and he's been doing this for many years, and it's has quite a bit of experience. He has many clients from around the world. The two that I personally resonated with most were Rolls-Royce and NTT. So he's been working with very large organizations, but has also worked with companies of all sides, helping them readjust their mindset and their muscle to deploy OKRs successfully. He's a speaker at business schools in demand, although these days, I guess, not as much in demand in person as he was once upon a time. And he's a multi-time published author as well. And he's passionate about delivering C-suite level OKR coaching to ambitious, large and medium-sized businesses. So the OKR champion is about as critical as it gets for that. My name is Jeremy Epstein. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at GTM Hub, and we're proud to be a partner with Oxine OKR as well. A couple housekeeping topics before I shut up and let everyone else listen to Peter's wisdom. The webinar is being recorded, and everyone's going to get a copy of the recording as well as a copy of Peter's deck. I highly encourage you to continue to put your questions and comments in the chat or in the Q&A function. This is, as you can see, designed to be a highly interactive and hopefully engaging session for you, where you have an opportunity to get your questions answered. And we will be making sure that Peter does that. My job is to keep him on task and tell him to shut the F up if necessary. But I won't, because it's going to be full of tremendous value. So he'll be going for about half an hour, and then hopefully there'll be plenty of questions and comments out there. So with no further ado, I pass it over to our featured star presenter of the morning and the afternoon, Mr. Peter Kerr, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow, what a build-up. Can you come and live with me?
No, definitely not. My wife would be unhappy, and that would be awkward. All you, my friend.
So that's us. Today, the role of a champion. Many names for it, but I think it is absolutely crucial role. For me, without this, OKRs fail. You can sign the death march on them. You can have little funerals for your OKRs without champions on board. Because I'll give you a scenario. What happens? C-suite get really, really excited. Somebody's read the book. You know the book. They've Measure What Matters. They've brought this back. They've decided to go and do an away day. They've brought in, perhaps they've been wise and brought in externals like us to go and facilitate that. But hey, they get a bunch of OKRs. And then they put them back into the organization. And then about 2 months later, they wonder why this thing hasn't happened. And that's really because they haven't identified that crucial role of the champion. The champion is the catalyst, the conduit, the person, the pulse, if you like. They are so vital. And I think in terms of a skill set to acquire now with the massive adoption of OKRs, it's a really good place to be. I certainly don't think you'll be unemployed if you're an experienced OKR champion in the foreseeable future. They're highly in demand. So lots of things you'll do, and I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail. But one of the key aspects of the role is facilitation. And interesting, you should say to shut the F up. That's kind of the role of an OKR champion at times. Sometimes you've got to allow some awkward silences to come because you're there to probe, you're there to investigate, you're there to push a little harder. Once you've got a framework and the skills in order to ask the right questions, you suddenly get people to participate. I think what we found in this particular environment is cameras off, mics off is a really tough place to do OKR workshops and review sessions. So you almost need to get yourselves to think about how you're going to work with one another in these environments. Make sure that you bring everybody in, they get to talk. But one of the main things you've got to encourage is people to come along prepared. OKRs are about driving the car through the front window, not looking through the rearview mirror So what you want to get rid of is a whole bunch of update meetings, and that's your job. People can get updated by using tools like GTM Hub. They can get one version of the truth. You've got to arrive with actual issues. What's getting in your way? How do you need colleagues to help? You need to think about what you're going to do next rather than and again, we'll talk a lot about leading and lagging indicators, which will become very familiar, and maybe you already are as champions. So what's the role of this facilitation role as a champion? Well, in part, you've got three main areas, really. So if you think about what you're trying to do is you're moving from this role as a coach towards a coach rather than being a manager. This isn't instructing, it's not directive. I read a great book quite recently called Turn the Ship Around. I don't know if anybody's read it, by Marquez, and fantastic book, really Guy picks up the worst performing sub in the US Navy, nearly kills everybody with a really bad decision. And because they were so indoctrinated to do what they were told, he got quite shocked by this. So he changed the whole vernacular around the whole boat, which was around, instead of asking for permission, it was about saying, what do you intend to do and why do you intend to do it? If you use that context in your OKR conversations, it gives you an element of challenge without actually being threatening. So what do you intend to do in order to achieve this? Can you tell me why you think that's a cool idea, and you know how we could measure it? These are things. So think about, if you get a chance to read that book, it's brilliant. And it's also really illustrative of the power of a flatter structure, the hierarchy, which again is something. What a lot of C-suites love to do is they want to stay exactly the same mindset they have now, but unleash all of the values and benefits of OKRs. It don't work that way. You know, this is about a mindset. It's about something that has to change. So, and what you're doing really is, once you've got the orchestra starting to play the music and they're starting to think about what OKRs are about, think of yourself as the conductor. You're controlling the cadence, the rhythm, the flow. And I'm using the word rhythm quite deliberately. OKRs, when they're internally embedded, you can almost think of them like a drum beat. You know, that there's something that everybody is continuing to do. It shouldn't be something that occurs to you, oh, I haven't looked at my OKRs for 8 or 9 weeks. Well, really what we're trying to do is embed habit and good practice. And the conductor really keeps the orchestra in tune. That's part and parcel of what you guys would be doing as champions. You need some guidelines, you need some bumper rails, you need some things that, and it's important for people to understand what OKRs are, but it's also important for them to understand what they're not. You know, so having some guidelines around how you think about OKRs and what they're intended to do, because you're going to get asked a whole bunch of questions by people, and I'll cover a few of those that we've seen over the last 2.5 years where we've been doing this in earnest. I think this is something that's been popping up quite a lot, and it's actually been an OKR. It was an OKR in a session I did with a company in India this morning, which was all about curiosity. You've got to be curious. You've got to wonder, because don't be fooled. I think what this is still a bit of an open source project. You know, it's evolving. Things that people are learning all the time about how to make this a little better. And you take the core skills and then you adapt them and make it your own. So staying on top of the community, staying on top of what's happening, the LinkedIn groups, really, really important. Read as widely as you can. Genuinely, I mean, I've been self-employed for a long time. I am officially unemployable and very proud of that. But what I love, I've never had so much fun doing a job as I'm doing currently, because there's always something else to learn. And that, you know, my tender years, that's really important, that I always find something that's going to stimulate me to find out more. I have a coach, you know, that helps me along my journey. So I find the community aspect of this really, really rewarding, because everybody's out there sharing. This is an interesting point around organizations. The organizations don't follow the org chart. Authority is not passed via the org chart. It happens in another way. It happens in a very informal way. There's two. There's the organization as it's structured and how they might present themselves to the outside world. But actually, there's the real one, which is the informal structure. And one of the role of you as a champion is to understand where this decision-making is taking place, where authority really is, because a bit of your job is to help unblock things when they're not working well, or to connect things when they could work better. So having a very, very sympathetic view of everybody's position across the company, hugely important. And if done well, the C-suite will really, really trust you, because you'll have oversight of so many things across the organization to make yourselves absolutely invaluable. But a good exercise to think of when you come off this call is, if you work within a company, think about how authority is passed from one place to another. Think about decision-making, because sometimes when you spot blockages in there, it's a good place where you can uncork the OKRs and help them move along a little more swiftly. So I'm not going to read any of this out, but I know that it's a bit of a takeaway. So typically, if you want to know the type of things that you're going to be up to, this is a reasonable list. There'll be others out there. There'll be lots of things you can Google, lots of things you can find out. But fundamentally, this facilitating of workshops, making sure that check-ins happen, but answering some of the common questions around it, because, and also a great important part is onboarding new members of the team, you know, and when people are coming on, then you've got to give them a clear guidelines as to where this is. What your job isn't is to set other people's OKRs. And that's really, really important. If people come and look at you and go, okay, tell me what my OKRs are, that's a big cross. No, that's not what it's about. You are there in a facilitation mode to make sure that they get the best results. But because that's the only way you'll get accountability and ownership, is if it comes out of their mouths. So I'm taking this really from Ben Lamort, another strong coach, and I've taken his parameters and I've just put them into questions. So parameters are really a little bit like the guidelines. They'll probably be the basis of your first playbook. You'll be starting to scope things out this way, but you need to be comfortable answering these questions, and you need to be trusted at the top level. And where you don't have answers to the questions, people in the C-suite, or if you're in the C-suite, this is what you need to think about. You know, there's an awful lot of things that are evolving. I'll pick out one in specific just because to show how to reinforce the point that this is something that's evolving. We're seeing an increasing shift of larger clients moving to 3 OKRs a year rather than 4. Big reasons for that. Here in Europe, we take far too many holidays. So nobody's at work around about Christmas time. You might as well forget anything from about 15th of December onwards, round about to the first week of January. Well, if you're in the world of an OKR cadence where you're trying to set stuff, that's quite awkward. So you're losing a lot of time. And similarly, you lose a lot of time. And if you're French, you get to go on a holiday for the whole of August. So again, you are finding yourselves behind the 8 ball if you haven't got enough time. So what happens then is people are setting OKRs very late in the first quarter. So actually you're setting something for 60 days rather than actually for 90, and it throws everything out. The other reason is that a lot of time you've got OKRs which are relying on lagging indicators which are coming out of other systems. So you might be reliant on the finance team to consolidate how the quarter performed, and you might be not getting sales figures till maybe the second week of April, in which case, what do? Because you're losing. So there is a lot out there that's happening. So finding the right pattern for your company is really important, and reading around and finding out answers to these sorts of questions is invaluable. I'm taking this because I'm using it as an analogy. When I first started doing this, I had my OKR only head on. That's not an OKR, that's a task. As if I'm scoring points on people. Complete waste of time, because it's really valuable, because you're missing the point of asking the why they brought that up, and it's the context. So in order to help shape some of those conversations, we've developed 4 buckets. And I think this originally comes from Cisco. I might be wrong, but I think it originally comes from Cisco. They might call them something else. But what you're looking at from the right-hand side is something that's perhaps, it could be a really big project that's going to happen in the organization. You might be getting audited next year. That's really important, and it's important you put resource against it, but it's not an OKR. It's a task, it's a big project. Similarly, you might run, and you might be an IT guy that's in charge of a big cloud-based delivery center, and you've got to make sure that you've got uptime of 99.999 and how many nines you want to go down there in terms of what's significant for you. Again, hugely important, not an OKR. It's because we're not going to change anything. Similarly, a lot of people have very, very big ambitions about what they want to do in the future. And this is a real one from a client that said, oh, it'd be great if we could get into China. Well, will you get into China next year? No. Will you be anywhere near getting into China next year? Absolutely not. Maybe 3 years' time, we could probably look at that. Okay, well, let's park that. Let's put that into our little future OKRs bucket. And as long as it's aligned to our mission, vision, and purpose, then it's a cool thing to do. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road. This is where the good stuff happens. What do we need to increase or decrease in the near to short term? And if it's, now we've got something we can work on with an OKR. So I'm giving a very simple example there of, again, it's a real world example of a client that was using far too much paid search. It was like crack cocaine for them. They just couldn't get themselves off it. Customer acquisition was absolutely poured into And we had to find a way of getting more organic search to them. So this became a quarterly OKR that laddered up to a much bigger area in terms of what the company was trying to do from a revenue standpoint. So I find these buckets quite useful, but everything that comes out of these things is always worth debate, exploring, to make sure we can be on a journey to discovering a better OKR. So a few lessons that we've learned. I've used this Lencioni's triangle quite a lot, and you'll find a lot of debate out there about whether you should take OKRs down to an individual level. It is a personal choice. I certainly don't think you should start there. I don't think it's a good place to start with OKRs, because you could bring out the same sort of behaviors as you had with management by objectives, which is the very reason that Andy Grove came up with OKRs, was to get this not tied to individual performance because people were gaming it. So thinking about the journey you're on, and think about the journey you're on as a team, and you're a part of this team, and you're kind of leading the team. You're kind of captain of the team, really. It's how you should almost think of it. So we've got to find a place where teams can disagree, and you're on this journey to finding this healthy. And I think OKRs are a great framework to have differences of opinion, because I've not met or run with any companies, very many of them, that actually are run by consensus. At some point, somebody's going to disagree, take a decision. You just got to respect one another and move on. So let's use the analogy of being a team and use it as a sport. And I think, so if we're playing a sport, we're there to win. Now imagine, and to give you some insights into that, if you are just throwing a ball around or practicing or knocking a ball over a net, the whole attitude, the whole energy is entirely different. But as soon as the whistle goes and the game's on, it's game on, and you've got your game face on, and you're thinking that. So when OKRs are done well, I want people to come on and go, this is game on. This is, I know exactly what we've got to do here. So here we are as a team trying to win. And the key results are just telling us the score. A team that's playing or doesn't know what the score is, doesn't really know. So a lot of this is about transparency, and your transparency in particularly in the world that we're in at the moment, is primarily done through software. You're going to have to find a way where everybody can see this, react to it, interact with it. And so for us, I think this is a good analogy when you're starting out on your OKR journey. If it comes down to individual levels and they're volunteering for it, I'm not 100% against it. I know Google use it, but a lot of Google's individual OKRs are very, very individual. Like I would like a yacht in the Bahamas, sort of individual, as opposed to what I'm going to be doing with a company. So on the Google Note, a while ago, they did a project called Project Oxygen. And Project Oxygen was all about, how they could increase productivity. How could they get more out of everybody and breathe life into the business? And because I think they were going through a bit of a lull. And the offshoot of that is this Project Aristotle, which if you go back to Aristotle's quote that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, Google have spent nearly 6 years looking at what makes an effective team. Now, if you connect that back, Google are the poster child of OKRs and have had the success they have, then by definition, successful teams are using OKRs. So it's symbiotic. The two things need to go hand in glove. You need to find out what makes a great team, and then you've got a great framework. A great framework without a great team, probably not going to get the right results. So you can find this online, big search, there's lots of it. I'm not claiming anything new here, but this is all about the big 5 elements that Google identified that are going to make a very successful team within the organization. And the psychological safety is a really, really interesting one with OKRs, because the biggest challenge you'll face with a lot of folk is that they don't like failing. They've got loss aversion. The idea of really pushing and stretching themselves, it's actually the idea of failure. And what psychological safety is doing is giving you permission. It's actually making you want to fail in order to learn. And that's that journey. So that's one of the things that they found was crucial. If you go back to the team analogy, you don't want people turning up late. You want people to be on time. You want people to treat you with respect. So you've got this really high bar in terms of you performing as a team. That gives you pride. Structure and clarity. Hey, well, that's OKRs. that this is what gives organizations. Everybody knows why they're coming to work in the morning. Everybody knows what's expected of them. You know, everybody knows to get that game face on.
Peter, let me ask you a question. I don't know everybody who's listening in on this webinar right now, but I'm going to bet most of them don't work at Google. And, you know, it's great that we use an example of Google, and, you know, they were OKRs from day one. You know, the book on the back behind you, Measure What Matters, talks about them and what have you. Psychological safety sounds great, but, you know, the OKR champions or the wannabe OKR champions who are on this call are going to have to confront a C-suite that maybe is not ready to create that type of culture, an environment that for years or decades has basically said, oh, if you take a risk and you fail, you know, you're in the bottom Jack Welch 10% or 20% and you get cut. You know, what advice would you give to our OKR champions about how do you go about starting to turn that ship around, if you will, so that you can create that type of culture? Because it sounds great, but it's really difficult to implement, or is it? You tell me, you're the expert.
It is really difficult to implement. It depends really how entrenched they are and of the belief that you, so I guess the extreme that you're talking about there, we certainly do come across it. And with them, you've really got to take small steps. You can't do too many OKRs too once, and you don't go too high. If you don't get C-suite engagement, if you don't get buy-in from them, if they don't start believing, it won't happen. A good way to approach it, though, in the light of what's happened in the last 6 months or 9, 10 months, is...
It feels like 12 years, but yeah.
It does. I'm running some workshops here in the UK, and the first question I'm asking everybody is, knowing what you know now, if we go back to March the 23rd, what have you done differently? And then start exploring that around mistakes, because I don't imagine there is a single C-suite in the world whose strategy has remained intact this year. So what do you want to build in as agility? So what you want to do is you want to get to a point where you are making better decisions in the future. The one I like is Jeff Bezos. Bezos is apparently, everybody keeps saying to Bezos, you know what? Tell me 4 or 5 things that are going to happen in the future so I can incorporate them into my strategy so I'm future-proof like Amazon. And he goes, it's an okay question, but it's the wrong question. The question you should be asking me is, think of 2 or 3 things that won't change in the next 4 years and anchor your strategy around that. And he, I think he calls it validated assumptions, because there's no point in Jeff's going to go, hey, you know what I'd like you to do? I'd like you to raise your prices, Jeff. And no, actually, while you're at it, could you narrow choice and slow down delivery? So the validated assumptions are around where we think things are going. What we've got to get in the habit of is experimenting and testing our hypothesis as to the best way of getting there. And I think it's actually encouraging people to, it's not just the fact, oh, we want you to fail, well done, you've learned the lesson. It's what have you learned and how will that then benefit the business?
So in some respects, COVID represents like a great opportunity to be a catalyst for culture change and to come in and say, look, you know, whatever plan you rolled out in January, February is on a shelf somewhere because we all know it got blown to bits. So this is a lesson, because that type of change is going to continue, whether it's a pandemic, hopefully not, or something else that's going to hit you. And we have to create a culture that's able to adapt. So we don't, is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's definitely what I'm saying. I got an interesting question. I ran a workshop in South Africa with a big bank, virtually, sadly. We have been down there, but sadly that seems to be no more. Everybody's discovered Zoom. But the point that one of them said quite pointedly was, I don't know whether it's COVID that's made us better or OKRs, which is an interesting question. And I said, well, so if you think about the behaviors and how you've changed because of COVID, how many of those are aligned to what you were trying to get at OKRs? And he goes, oh, I see what you mean. So for example, digital transformation projects that had been slated to take, 18 months, they were getting done in 5 weeks because they had to be done.
Right.
Working with a very large insurance company. They were going to do this massive rollout of putting a software refresh across all their desktops. Now they plan to just give the C-suite and then move down the org chart, because obviously the more important you are, the better the IT you need, right? Wrong. As soon as you have to close all your call centers down and make them work at home, all those horrible Windows 7 machines don't work. So they had to invert all of the rollout plan according to the fact that COVID had happened, because all our customer support teams and all our sales staff suddenly had to work from home. So it's just putting fresh eyes on things. The destination remains the same, but really it's quite tricky on how we're going to get there.
So Peter, speaking of questions are starting to fly in on the chat and the Q&A. So I don't want to derail the conversation from your presentation, but there have been some interesting questions. Are you open to taking them, or do you want to go forward now? Because
no, let's get the questions going.
All right. So, so Maria asked, she said that she works at a company where they implemented OKRs 2 years ago. It's a company of about 20 or so people, and they take the top-down, bottom-up approach with partner to associates. And she says that five of these people are partners, and they're very institutionalized. They've worked at large companies. And it's primarily driven by one person. But where she's struggling is, how do OKRs work in a small company? And I wonder if there's an analogy or an opportunity to extrapolate from that to say, well, here's how it could work at a small team within a large company. So do you have any advice for Maria about how to help OKRs really fit within a small company where you have these 5 partners who, have sort of a large company mindset, but they're really trying to make it work at a small company setting?
It's really interesting. I think what you've got to do is probably harness their ambition. So if those 5 guys have got the idea of where they want to be, I use a phrase quite a lot in a lot of workshops. If you get stuck, keep going up. Is there an alignment point that these 5 guys are all, or girls are all interested in, that we can absolutely align to? And really now it's about in conversations. How do we engage them in a conversation that says, okay, so let's imagine we've jumped into our DeLorean now, and we're now at December 2021. Yeah, we're going into 2022. We've had now a whole COVID-free year, and we've actually met some humans, and we're out and we're having a lunch, and we're going to look back on the year. What have we done this year to pursue that big thing? And just listen to them. Because really what you need is you need to arm yourself with their words. It's not, the OKRs have got to be instructed by them. So a lot of this is about engagement. The other big thing that most small companies do too quickly is they do far too many OKRs. If you've got people who are unsure, just have 1 or 2. Just these big rocks, these things that that nobody is going to complain about. Because again, when you get egos at a C-suite, sometimes I think, well, my C-suite engagement isn't worth it because I don't have an OKR. Rubbish. These are cross-functional largely. I think it's not for everybody to have an OKR just because they've got a chief in their name. So I would say start small, but the biggest thing I would say is get the story right and get the story out of them, because really all OKRs are about, they need a narrative. They need a framework for you to tell a story. If I can tell a cool story, I got you engaged. If I say I must hit 72% of my target this month, well, so what?
And no one cares.
Nobody cares.
Right.
So use their language to make them care, and then you'll slowly start to engage them.
Yeah, so it sounds like OKRs have to just be really good consultants.
Well, there is part and parcel of that.
Yeah.
And I often say to people that my OKRs are kind of like my diving suit, but when I get to the bottom of the ocean, I still need to do something.
Fair enough. There's another question that came in from Amjad, who asks, can team OKRs be different from individual team member OKRs? And specifically looking for examples out of HR and sales functions that maybe you've come across in your career.
That's interesting, because as I said, it's down to a matter of choice whether you go to personal OKRs. I think once you're comfortable with, I would start with team, but what you've got to make sure with OKRs is that they're aligned. They're back to the hours of focus and alignment, stretch, and tracking. After time, you're going to get commitment. But the main thing is, are they aligned? So I've got no issues with a personal OKR. as long as it's very fiercely aligned to supporting how you work in the team. So, that's it. That would be my main observation.
I guess that comes back to structure and clarity here on number 3.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
People understanding why you're turning up for work every day is a really powerful thing. A lot of people talk about a lack of engagement in the UK and US and right across the world in terms of workforce. Why they're not engaged? Well, because they don't know why they're there. They're not very interested in why they're there. They're just kind of collecting a paycheck. Well, this is where the storytelling comes in. This is where, emotion and passion and these things that you're not going to get out of a book. These are the things that you need to instill and learn how to communicate to your teams.
Not you're the expert here, but I'm going to pontificate for a minute, if I may, give you a break. That as we shift from this industrial era mindset where it's about output and widgets and what have you to this knowledge economy framework where it's about outcomes, and every single person on this call is a knowledge worker. These people are complete free agents in the ultimate sense, can go anywhere, now, has been blessed to work remotely. So number 4 and number 5 on this chart become increasingly, because there's a study by a great in a book by a guy named Dan Pink who says, up to a certain amount of money, you need to just obviously keep your household running or whatever, but above a certain salary level, the money doesn't matter. And it starts going into things like autonomy and mastery and purpose and everything you have in 4 and 5. And so it's almost like if you don't create that psychological safety and that dependability, you're never going to have an engaged workforce, which means your knowledge workers are going to take off and, go work somewhere else. I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's what
I think you make a good point. And I think part of the skill that we can do is find a narrative that they understand and index it back to them. So if somebody wants a business case for this, I'll give you a business case for this. Would you like to hang on to your staff longer?
Bingo.
Would you want to spend $500,000 training somebody just for them to then go and join McKinsey's?
There's your ROI on OKRs.
So, there is ways you can translate that what looks like a relatively soft and woolly into actually hard business ROIs.
Oh man, now the questions are flying here. I'm starting to have a hard time keeping track of this one, but I don't know why don't you go to the next slide or two, and then I'll come in and I got Richard's questions, I got Sharon's, I got Prasad's. So let's make it count. We're here for them, not for us.
Sure. Well, I mean, if you want to know a little bit more about all of that, Laszlo Bock wrote a parallel book to John Doe's book, and he sees the way we do with OKRs is why they're successful with people is that people have a mission. They understand why they're bowling into work every day. People know what everybody else is doing, so there's a level of transparency and trust and honesty. And then if you see something wrong, you're empowered to speak up and say, hey, I don't like that. Can we have a chat? So it moves quite nicely. You can see these behaviors are a little bit more. We get a lot of conversations around is leading and lagging indices. You really need to be quite forensic on this as a OKR champion, because sometimes you need to set some rules around making sure that you have a good mixture of both. I'll give you a simple analogy about what they are. And so one that's close to my heart, a lagging indicator is losing weight and is getting on the scales. No matter how often I stand on the scales, I don't lose weight. I can do it again and again and again and again, and I won't get any change. The leading indices is, do I get up a bit earlier and go to the gym? Do I change my lifestyle a bit and cut out a few beers? All the things that I can measure are behavioral changes laddering up to what I actually want to get, which is the lagging indicator. So when you guys are setting OKRs and somebody says, I want to hit X amount of new sales in new markets. Okay. So what would show us we were making a success? And somebody say, well, tell you what, we'll run a webinar. These are good things. Apparently they're good for sales. So we run a webinar and we say, right, I'm going to make a key result 10. We're going to run 10 webinars. It's not a great key result. If you say if I'm going to get 10 sales qualified leads from webinars, now you got me interested. So now I can run the webinars and I can see what the sales leads are. I've got a leading indices. And if the webinars aren't working, hey, stop doing them or tweak them or get some feedback and find how you can improve them. So leading indicators and lagging indicators, super important to get successful mix in OKRs.
Thanks for bursting my bubble. I get on the scale every morning, and for some reason, it doesn't seem to make a difference. So yeah, now you've woken me up. Let me throw another question out there for you. Richard asked, what do you find is the best cycle for OKRs? Would annual OKRs work at a company level with quarterly departmental ones, or should they both be the same? Like, what's that rhythm that you think works, especially as you start to talk about leading indicators, lagging indicators, and what have you?
Great question. So a lot of the work that we're getting at the moment is what we've termed OKR reboots. So people that have tried it themselves. And again, you read the book, and it's a great book, and it's quite inspirational, but it's not a handbook. It's not going to tell you how to do it. So one of the big mistakes people do is set quarterly OKRs for the company level. That leads to absolute chaos. So for us, if you're starting out on this path, annual OKRs for the company and business unit, department, team level at quarterly levels, because otherwise you're constantly shifting the target. Right. So you need an alignment point. So I would say, yeah. And the other tip around that really is, we were in a workshop not long ago, and the CEO, and I won't take credit for it, but the CEO said, so Peter, what you're saying to me is I should create the objective and put the team around it. I went, yeah, I guess that is what I'm saying. And what a lot of people do is ladder them into the org chart and say, well, and then that just creates the silos. Whereas if you free yourself from all of that and say, look, this is our objective, who needs to be in the room to make that happen?
Right.
And then you can find quarterly teams are got different people rolling in and rolling out. So you might need legal to start with to get all the contracts in place. They might then roll out. Then you might need comms team to come in and start making you famous. Then you need the customer success team to do the other. So as an overall overarching OKR, you might find the team's quite fluid over a year.
Yeah, I think one of the big aha moments for me in my OKR journey was realizing that OKRs are about breaking down the functional silos and orchestrating cross-functional activities. That we've spent the last 20 years building up these silos of SaaS platforms that are marketing and sales and finance and what have you. But OKRs are about connecting and stitching all of those together so that all of these interdependencies can work and drive against those big rocks that you identified. So yeah, great point on that one. Next question, if I may. All right, here we go. So Prasad wants to know, since we are talking about OKR champions today, what kind of mix should the OKR champions be? And one thing I think that's sort of implied in that, and Prasad, I apologize if I'm reading too much into this, is, is it OKR champions plural? We work with Societe Generale, and I know our champion there, Audrey, has recruited a team of 30 or 40 other champions. So what kind of mix and how do you find OKR champions? Should they come from functions like HR or operations, or should it just be people who are naturally have the skills that you outlined at the beginning of the deck?
It's a great question. Again, I think so from experience, so we work with a large bank in South Africa as well. I think it's a joint client. I think you guys work there too. And we've created, I think the rollout is around about 2,500. I think there's probably going to be around about 100 OKR champions across 2,500.
Wow.
Now that's not strictly necessary for everybody sometimes, but what you'd like to think is that if you start off small and get that right, because part of the job as the early OKR champions, you're top of the tree, right? So you're going to be kind of in the trainer role. So you're going to train people how to become OKR champions and how you facilitate. So there's a level of a pecking order, but in terms of the type of job function, really you want somebody that's got good visibility right across the org. So somebody like a product manager, they make really good OKR champions. Some larger firms right now, because they'll have dedicated change management people. And again, they're involved with everybody. So that's who we've got in that bank in South Africa. We've got a lot of change managers involved. Scrum masters make good OKR champions because they're used to the cadence. You can align sprints very much similarly to actually how you can take an OKR cycle. So anybody that's got good visibility But I'll tell you, the number one is wanting to do it. If you really want to do it, if you're interested in how your company makes money and how it can make more money and how it can be more successful, I would take that above everything else.
If you're not passionate and you don't want it, then it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
I mean, look, OKR champions are going to have a seat at the C-suite table if they don't already. I mean, every single one of them. It's as fast track as you're going to get once. And we're seeing this in terms of the visibility throughout the organization. All right, I know you have a couple more slides. We also have a whole bunch of new questions coming in. So why don't you do two more slides, and then I'm going to jump to the last couple of questions, and we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to skip that because I'm going to go to something that is quite close to my heart, really. Is OKRs are a skill. They take time, they take practice. I keep reading online, oh, come on our 24-hour OKR champions course and you'll be a champion at the end of it. No, you'll know a lot more about OKRs, but I'll guarantee you won't be. It's something you need to experience, take it like riding a bicycle. You would not buy a bike and then suddenly be able to do the Tour de France.
Right.
Reading a couple of YouTube videos doesn't make you a concert pianist. It takes time. So be kind on yourself. That embracing you're going to make a few mistakes. That's not a problem. Do not let perfect get in the way of good. It's part and parcel of what you're going to learn.
So OKRs are a path for self-compassion, is what you're saying.
I think they are. Yeah, I think you got to.
I love it.
I think you got to treat yourselves with a bit of kindness and also a bit of sense of humor. I look back on some of the ones that David, Mark, and I wrote back in the day, and you think I just cringe, but. Because what happens with OKRs is you don't unlock all of these superpowers all at once. It's not like Superman jumping out of the telephone booth with these pants on. Right. It doesn't happen. But what you can have is suddenly you're getting a better quality of conversation. And that's ultimately what OKRs are about. Will they generate a better, high quality conversation that's going to drive people towards achieving the goals? And that's what they do.
I love this. This is just a great reminder of something that we all know. So speaking of skills and results, Sharon, I'm going to try to jam this in here, Sharon. So hopefully I'm doing a good job. She asked the question, how would you define an OKR for operational excellence? We are starting out our digitization journey, which I guess is like a digital transformation journey. And she'd like to define a corporate level OKR to align projects and initiatives to. How might you, just an example off the top of your head, and you get what you pay for on this call, Sharon, so you're going to have to just deal with it. How would you word the objective and what might some key results be? Or maybe what have you seen when it comes to operational excellence around OKRs or an OKR for it, sorry.
Okay, I'll tell you a story then.
Bring it. Stories are good. So
we were working with a client. We were in the C-suite doing our thing, and they came up with an OKR, which is called In Pursuit of Operational Excellence. That's what we're going to do. We're going to pursue operational excellence. Great. So I had to just ask one question. Why? Well, because obviously we want to handle customer inquiries better. We want customer support to be better. We want to onboard staff better. I said, all right, okay. So I said, okay, well, let's just pick off one of those things. And so why are you pursuing it? Well, so why haven't you got it now? And they went, what do you mean? I said, well, why haven't you got operational excellence now? Because it sounds like if I went to anybody in the company and said, do you think we should be operationally excellent? They go, oh yeah, I think we should be.
Why not?
Why not? How could you argue with that? So what had happened was we just changed the way that it was presented, and we actually identified the areas that needed to be improved. So for example, we just earn the right for customer respect. Earn the right for... So what you've got to do with an OKR is imply some level of change. So if the operational excellence exists at a level now, what are we going to benchmark? Why are we moving it from one place to another? And then put something in there that tells folks, hey folks, where we're at right now ain't good enough. We've got to get better. So find a way to capture that and you'll get the momentum you need in your something that sounds quite high level, but relatively dull.
Alexander Jansen says, operational excellence, only specific questions have specific answers. Operational excellence is way too abstract. Great example, Peter. So there's at least one satisfied webinar attendee. So you can sleep well tonight based on that one. Alexander, thank you for making us feel like this was worth it. I love it. Hopefully, Sharon, you feel like you got your question answered on that one. Good job. She said, absolutely. Thanks so much for reviewing. I love it. And I love how you basically took this vague concept of operational excellence and saying, no, there's an emotional component, like let's earn the right. So great job. In America, we'd say hit it out of the park. I'm sure there's a cricket analogy for that, but I don't really know it. So scoring 6 runs or something like that, I don't know what it is. All right, let's move on. I'm way out of my depth on this one. So anonymous attendee, we have to respect all the anonymous attendees as well. How could product development departments in an automotive industry, man, people are really trying to get some free consulting here, but that's okay, set OKRs considering they have a 3-year or so period for a product? And the targets are well defined with several milestones. So how do you avoid defining tasks as an OKR? So this is a great example. I mean, cars, you can't usually build those in a quarter, and they do take multiple years, especially with the concept cars. Any thoughts on how you might sort of structure when you're in a business that does have these, like building a dam or something, or an aircraft carrier? Those are bigger projects.
Yeah, and I think the number one thing is that not everything that you do in the organization needs to go into your OKRs. If you're already doing something well and you've got great project management skills and you're delivering it, that's fine. I think the OKRs are about what you might change. So if you were going to look at, say you're going to look at a product lifestyle or where product life cycle, how that was going to, where do you think that you need to build in, where the challenge is going to be? You know, what barriers are we going to face in order to hitting all of these targets? And they would be about the OKRs. It isn't about shoehorning a project plan and turning it into a nice OKR language. It doesn't need to be there. Less is more.
All right. Wow. Well, Peter, you are doing great here. So Alexander says he's not only satisfied, he's fully excited. Lou, I'm sorry, I got to pull this up. Ludek says, I'm sitting here with many aha moments that are around me, so obvious, but so well described by Peter right now. So good job, my friend. You're crushing that one. Brian wants to know, is there any type of certification or accreditation that can be earned to validate to other people that you have the requisite knowledge? Is there an OKR champions, diploma? How do you, or is it just like you step up and other people recognize it? How does one get recognized as an OKR champion?
Okay, I mean, well, there's a few. I think there's there's a bunch of old hands who've been doing this for a while and now setting up their own. So instead of making money by going out and helping clients do OKRs, they're making money by helping coaches become accredited. So Ben Lamourte's got one, I think, which is the OKR Coaching Network. I think the guy he wrote the book with, Paul Niven's got his own as well around OKR coaching. I think they're really good starting points, and I think but it's as long as they're in the context that it's the beginning of your journey. You wouldn't want somebody from medical school to be doing brain surgery only just because they read the book.
Right.
So
we should go back to that one.
I do believe though that it will emerge. I think there will be a set of standards because it is a little bit like the Wild West out there. There is a lot of people who've read the book and claim to be able to do this. I would say the main testimony you could have would be from customers or internal. The fact that your teams love what you're doing. You go and knock it out of the park and you help your organization deliver on their goals. I'm telling you, you don't need a piece of paper.
Yeah, one thing we've started to do, and this is a plug, we put together monthly OKR champions roundtables where we invite the OKR champions from our clients or even not our clients to come and just share what their challenges are. So I think finding communities of other OKR champions is a great way to share your knowledge and get insights on how you can do it. So the accreditation is nice. I think a lot of it's just going to be proof in the pudding, leading. One of them was saying how she leads reading like a book club on Measure What Matters, and she has questions for each chapter and leads people along. Okay, here's another one that I've actually heard of. How is OKR methodology different from, say, balanced scorecards or some of the other, I don't want to say fad, but approaches that have, because OKRs are not a fad. Any thoughts on that? And keep in mind, we have 5 minutes left. So you got to make this count. And if you want to give us the big close, we can do that. But we want to respect people's time. That's OKR of us.
I think they work hand in glove. I mean, I really like balanced scorecard because what it does is around the 4 main areas of balanced scorecard, it gives you 4 baskets of KPIs. Yeah. So you'll have stuff on finance, you'll have stuff on ops, you'll have stuff on customer, you'll have stuff on people, right? And there's a bunch of metrics in there, and that's what balanced scorecard. What OKRs then led you to do is, out of all of those KPIs that we've gathered, which one do we really need to shift the needle on? And then you just apply your OKRs to that. So they work really well together, to be honest with you, as does business blueprinting, as does business canvas. These are all great tools. Fundamentally, OKRs are about getting the job done.
So here's another question, and I want you to answer this. Promise me you're going to answer this one honestly, Peter. Okay, so anonymous attendee asked, onboarding a new vendor like GTM Hub can take approximately 2 months due to security and legal constraints. Would you recommend starting now with GTM Hub or starting on spreadsheets? And if so, how? And then migrating to the tool, or sorry, the platform, when everything has been happening, or do you want to just get into the platform and start using, or does it not matter?
I think it's horses for courses. I mean, I think the reason that we think coaching works well with software is that we make the introduction that bit more slick. I mean, I'm going to give you a political, here's one that's going to appeal to both of you and neither of you.
I want the truth. I don't want you to appeal to me. I want the truth.
Software exacerbates OKRs, either positively or negatively.
There you go.
If you get great OKRs, the software will accelerate you beyond, because you'll be able to communicate. If you've got terrible OKRs that are rubbish, the software can't help you, and actually you'll make things worse because people will just pour everything in there.
That's fair. All right, you've got 3 minutes left. Bring us home with anything left on your deck. If not, we got plenty of more questions. Up to you.
I'll give you the big warning sign. This is a very personal thing. Does anybody recognize the HIPPO? The HIPPO stands for the highest paid person's opinion.
Nice.
Right. Be wary as champions that the CEO has done all of the talking, particularly when you're on Zoom calls. So we've done split groups, and you'll get one group where everybody's the CEO is not on it and everybody's engaging. And I'll go on another one and the CEO is basically leading it. So I have to take the CEO to one side and go, I'm going to have to put red and yellow cards up for you to shut up. And you need to start building this relationship say to the CEO, the main reason that people are always looking for you is because you're always giving them something to do. At some point you might just have to say, chuck the question out. And so you need that help. You need to make them, it's almost like a little conspiracy, get them before the session and go, it would really help us out on these OKRs is if you can direct other people a little bit, but don't say. So beware of the HIPPO.
All right, well, let's advance to the final for the contact information. We got 2 minutes left, and look at this. Is this what you want to finish with?
I do, yeah.
All right, go. It's your show. I'll shut up. Go.
No, it's cool. I mean, but telling stories and making one page stand out and connecting all the internet can be really, really exciting. And that's what you need off the top of your head. Why are we doing this? Well, let's go back to the vision and mission and what our values are. This is what we're all about, guys. This is what we're doing, right? And if we don't achieve that, we're going to kick ourselves. We've got a great team together. Now, what are we going to do in the next 90 days? And how do we measure that? It's finding the story, I think, is hugely impactful. Don't think of it as something that's dry as toast.
All right. Well, let's go ahead to see if people want to follow up with you or contact you or us or what have you. We've already done all that. There you go. Some very nice. Agnieszka said, very insightful session. Thank you so much for the great presentation and for answering all the questions, but we didn't answer all the questions. Sadly, there are more than we could handle today. So I guess we're just going to have to do it again another time. And Kenneth says it was great. He's an OKR consultant. So a lot of kudos coming into you. If you're looking for a great partner who can help you, obviously you've gotten a small amuse-bouche, if you will, of Peter today. There's a lot more where that came from. You can reach out to them. Obviously, we're here to help. Everyone will get the slides. You'll get the recording. It's exactly 9:00 a.m. on the East Coast, which I guess makes it about 2 o'clock, 1400 where you are. We're going to shut it down. Thank you, because our OKR was start and stop on time, and 70% of that. So thank you all for attending. Peter, phenomenal job. Obviously, a ton of value that people got out of this, and unfortunately, some questions. For those questions that weren't answered, we will, maybe Peter, we can put together a little email and answer those when in our follow-up.
Yeah, by all means, no problem.
Awesome. Everyone, have a wonderful day. Please stay safe out there, and have a great holiday season wherever you are. So thank you so much. Peter, great job, my friend.
Yes, thanks for
You
giving
got to get Chumbawamba now playing, right?